All right, you guys, welcome back to the YouTube channel. Today we're going to be showing you guys how to do the timing on your Mazdaspeed engine. Before we get started, if you haven't already, make sure you like and subscribe. It helps us out a ton to make sure that we're able to continue to bring you guys educational videos like this to help your Mazdaspeed, Focus ST, EcoBoost, Supra, etc. Get your maintenance done and show you guys how to do it. So first things first, obviously this motor is out of the car. It's a built stage 1 gravedigger block that we're going to be building for one of our shop cars. But we figured while we're in the process, we might as well show you guys how to do the timing once you've gotten to this step. So obviously, to start with the motor in the car, you're going to be pulling off your passenger side motor mount, making access in that area, etc. And then getting to a point where, all that's left is your timing cover, water pump, etc. So the first thing that you want to do is you want to get your engine as close to top dead center as possible before doing the job. If you come look down in here, you'll be able to actually see what you want is your cylinder 1 and 4 to be at the top. And then you want your cam lobes to be facing at a slight 45-degree angle towards each other. Now you're gonna do that by rotating your crank clockwise, so that way you're able to get the number 1 cylinder piston in here, up and to the top of its compression stroke, or just before it. Great. As you can see, it's kind of right down in there. There we go. As you can see, this piston is at the top of its stroke. And if you come over here, you'll see this piston is also at the top of its stroke, telling us that it's close to or at top dead center. Now again, you're gonna wanna bring this over here on the front side of the motor. You'll see this here. That's basically a lining up point. Once you come down here, you'll rotate your block just until this threading behind on the timing cover lines up here with this hole right there. And that should put you pretty close to top dead center. Typically your first step before you get to that point of actually rotating this crank pulley and putting it up, to where we believe is top dead center, you're gonna wanna make sure that you have the timing tool for it. So what this is a Mazdaspeed timing toolkit. And what it does is it reaches out and it creates a stopping point for the crankshaft, which we'll kind of show you how that works once we have this timing cover off. To remove your timing cover, you're gonna have 3 13mm bolts here, a 13mm bolt down here, and then the rest is all gonna be 8mm bolts surrounding the timing cover. You will need to remove your water pump pulley. That'll need to come off, that's 3 10mm, and then your idler pulley is also a 10mm as well. Once you have all these bolts disconnected, you'll go ahead and you'll remove, we obviously didn't put this on very tight just for kind of educational purposes here, but you'll use an impact or something along those lines to get this 21mm locking bolt off. And then you'll slide off this crank pulley there, leaving you with something that looks like this. You will need to remove the crank pulley first, as there is an 8mm that hides just right behind it. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna pull this valve cover, or this timing cover off for you, so that way you guys can see the timing components. Again, most of the washers and stuff are already on here. We're already using all the new parts. So we've set this up just basically to show you guys how to do this video and accomplish timing your own motor. So as you can see, we have all the timing components here. When you get your kit from us here at Graveyard Performance, you're gonna be getting a VVT actuator, both of your chain guides, a brand new chain, a new tensioner. You're also gonna get a timing cover crank seal, all 3 of your diamond washers for the crank, and both of your diamond washers for each of the cam gears as well. That makes it so it's inclusive to what needs to be replaced, and so that way you guys can get this job done effectively and with the correct parts, and knowing that they're OEM genuine parts as well. So the first thing that we're gonna do is we're gonna remove this tensioner here. It's 2 10mm bolts here, and then from there we'll start just making our way through and kind of go from there. All right, so now that your timing cover is off, this is a lot what your timing component's going to be looking like. So the first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna remove this tensioner. Obviously we have a pin in it right now to keep it from tensioning this guide right now. But once this is removed, without this pin in it, it's gonna create some pressure. So what you're gonna need to do is, once it's fully extended, it'll be pushing up against this side right here. You just gotta kind of pop the back of it up and it'll pop out for you like that. After that, obviously we have our oil pump down here. This chain and sprocket are gonna have to come off. with the rest of everything else. But we're gonna go ahead and remove the guides. These are all 8mm bolts for these two, and then 10mm bolts for that tensioner. So once we have these removed out, we'll go ahead and pull the guides off. Now that you're at this point, you should be able to go ahead and just grab this pulley, and it should slide basically right off for you. Depending on how much tension is up in the actual chain itself, you may need to loosen some of these gears. Either way, you're gonna have to end up removing them entirely. So both of these gears are gonna come off. These are gonna be 21mm bolts, just like the crank pulley. And you're gonna wanna make sure that you are using a adjustable wrench to hold the cam in place, so that way you're not rotating any of the valves or anything like that, causing any, contact between a piston and a valve. So you're gonna wanna remove these. Again, we just have these hand tight, just to kind of give you guys an example of, what we're doing. And once this comes off, you'll be able to pull off this chain. A new chain is included with the kit. So you'll want to dispose of your old chain, as well as dispose of your old timing guides, your old tensioner, as well as your old VBT actuator. So we're gonna go ahead and set this stuff to the side. Like I said, it is all new, so we are gonna be using it later on in the video. All right, so once we're at this point, you're actually able to see down here where the crank lines up. So originally, back where this timing tool goes, you're gonna have a 10mm plug in here. You're gonna wanna pull that out, and you're gonna want to go ahead and just put your tool all the way in. I believe it's a 16, but it'll sit right up in there. There shouldn't really be any friction or no real need to tighten it down. Just hand tight and a little extra torque on that is gonna be good. And then right in here, you'll see that the crank is already resting on that pin because we have already gotten everything at top dead center. From this point, what we need to do is remove this oil pump gear. It can definitely be a pretty big pain in the butt with cars that are higher mileage or haven't had this done yet. What we typically will do is we'll take a set of needle nose pliers that are at a 45° or a 90° angle and stick it up in these two holes there. You'll see that they get pretty deep up in there, and that'll allow you to get, have someone to either hold this while you're torquing on this 10mm or taking an impact to it, whatever it is. But there is usually a lot of tension on here, which I believe the torque spec's only about 20 foot-pounds, 30 foot-pounds. So nothing too crazy, but it definitely feels like 100 foot-pounds when you're trying to get it off. So obviously we've already broken this loose. So we're gonna go ahead and just remove this out of here. Now, once you've done that, you have a couple options. You can go ahead and you can remove the tensioner for the oil pump and the guide. It does make it a little bit easier, but you end up fighting one way or another to kind of get all of this off. So what we'll do is we'll go ahead and just start sliding everything off. You can see that tensioner is gonna kick it down. There's a lot of tension on it. So we'll just slowly pull these gears, hold that tensioner up, etc. Now, before I take this off, when you pull off your crank pulley, there's gonna be a washer. There's gonna be a washer here, another washer here, and then another washer is gonna be in the back resting up against the crank. We already have this washer resting on the crank. This is a brand new washer, hasn't had any tension on it. So again, we're gonna be using this. Now from here, it's gonna be pretty much the exact same process, just in reverse of adding your new parts. So once you get to this point, you're gonna go ahead and put your first washer all the way up against the crank. We recommend having an extremely clean surface. We do take brake clean to the actual crank surface itself, just to make sure that there's not any contaminants, oil, etc., that are gonna cause any slippage on these washers. Clean hands is always a good thing as well. Use clean gloves often. If for any reason you feel like something's gotten dirty, take some brake clean to it and be very careful when you're handling these washers, just to make sure you're getting the best seal possible for this. Now on this pump gear, you're gonna see that there's two little lines here. That's gonna match the indent that is right here, as well as the indent that is on the actual oil pump itself. this gear needs to line up with that indent and sit inside of it. Otherwise, it's not gonna do a great job of pumping oil through your system, and eventually will cause a failure. So same process, getting it back on. We wanna try and get this lined up as much as possible. We have this on, it's in the groove, and we can tell because it's spinning that oil pump, and it's creating a nice good seal. So we're gonna go ahead and put that right there. We're gonna grab our brand new oil pump bolt, and we're gonna get that in there. Now, as you can see, we didn't really need to touch any of your tensioner or your guide. Again, it does make it a little bit easier if you are doing that, but overall it ends up being 6s. Like I said, you're gonna struggle one way or another with that. You wanna make sure you have really good clean surfaces here on your cams as well. But let's go ahead and set up the cams. Obviously we have the crank down and in time. So next we're gonna focus on making sure that the cams are at top dead center as well before we finish putting any gears, chains, etc. on the car. All right, so as you guys can see, we have our timing tool also from Mazdaspeed. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna line up these cams to get them in position so that way they are also at top dead center, just like our crank is. So what you're gonna do is these have very specific slots. If your cams are 180 degrees out, these will not fit. You'll know that it's wrong. You want to make sure that the cam lobes closest to the timing side, again, are facing at an angle about 45 degrees towards each other. What we're gonna do is we're gonna put this plate up to it, and we're just gonna rotate until that slides in there. That side is in. Now we're gonna come over to this side, and we're gonna do the same thing. This one needs to be rotated a little bit this way. There we go. And you're gonna see that this is gonna hold our cams in at directly top dead center. Now we'll go back to the front, show you guys the timing process for putting on the washers, putting on the gears, putting on the levers, etc. So that way you guys can see how to time your motors and get it back on the road. All right, so once we get to this point here, first thing you wanna do is take a lot of brake clean, make sure that everything has a nice clean surface to it. So I'll typically go through, spray down a rag, get it nice and wet, and just wipe down the front face of this gear here, and then dry it off, make sure there's no contaminants. From there, we're gonna go ahead and grab our next washer. Again, there's another washer that goes on the inside from the crank and behind this gear. So now we're gonna take another washer. I'm gonna put this down just a little bit on the rag, get a little bit of brake clean on that. We're gonna slide it up on there. The next thing you're gonna wanna do is you're gonna grab your other gear right here, and you're gonna make sure it's nice and clean. Now for the first gear, it's not an even gear like this is, so you can see that this gear is the same depth on both sides. This one has one short end and then one that's a little bit longer. That longer end is gonna protrude out towards the timing cover, and the smaller end is gonna go right up against that crankshaft there. So once we've cleaned this gear off, made sure it's nice and good to go, we're gonna go ahead and just drop it right along this next portion. All right, from here, we're good to go ahead, and we're gonna start putting on our chain guide and tensioners, so that way everything's all lined up and set. The first one that I typically will put on is going to be the actual lever. Why? Because it has the most amount of movement. If you go ahead and you start right away with this one, it's in a locked position with these two bolts. You're not gonna be able to move that much and be able to get the play that you need. This is actually the last lever that I put on, just so that way we're able to get everything else on fairly easily. So again, same process. Now at this point, we're gonna grab one of the cam washers, as well as one of our gears here. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and spray these down with brake clean, again, making sure that they are clean and good to go. The brake clean will evaporate, so you don't need to really dry these off a ton. They're gonna automatically kind of dry themselves. Then we're gonna wanna clean off these surfaces just to make sure there's no oil. Obviously, these carry oil throughout the cam for oil control purposes and lubrication. So we're gonna wanna wipe these down really well. hit them with a little bit of brake clean. So again, that washer is getting a good contact and surface. Now the best way to typically do this is I will go ahead and I will just drop the washer in there like so, grab the bolt, and just try and get a couple spins on this washer. Now this is gonna be your VVT actuator, so this is gonna go on the intake cam. We're gonna get it lined up, push it on in there. I like all my stuff to say Fomoco at the top to show that it's not really Mazda. We're gonna leave this a little bit loose and we'll come back to that here in just a second. Like I said, kind of just get it, up against it and then back it off just a hair because you are gonna be putting some tension on these as we tighten them down. So now that that's complete, we're gonna go ahead, we're gonna grab our cam gear right here that still has the chain on it. What we're gonna do is we're gonna wrap this chain here. That's gonna put us in a pretty good position to where we'll be able to get everything kind of lined up, put that on its path, etc. Now I'm gonna set it there while I get our next washer ready, which again is right here. And kind of same situation, I'm gonna go ahead, put this right on the back, and we're gonna screw this a couple threads through it to hold that washer on there. Make sure that all of your teeth gears are on. And tighten this last one up. So now that we're at this point, we can go ahead and we can start getting our tensioner in place and ready to go, as well as getting your chain guide on to hold this in place. And we'll make that progress as we go. You want to make sure you tuck it nice and behind it, and obviously tighten these up as you go. I'll go through and I'll tighten them up, after we get done with the video, but this is just kind of giving you guys a quick how-to. Now, once we're at this point, what we're gonna do is we're gonna go ahead and grab a pry bar. It's gonna sound interesting. But we're gonna grab a pry bar to go ahead and get these tight in conjunction with using our adjustable wrench to hold the cam. What this is gonna do is it's gonna give us the tightest surface that we can get on this chain to make sure that you have good tension, good pressure, etc. In your VVT system. You don't want it to be too tight, but once you go ahead and release this, the tensioner will automatically do its job, kind of evening everything out and dispersing the tension as needed. All right, so at this point, what we're doing is we're gonna have Alex go ahead and hold the adjustable wrench up on that cam to keep it moving. He's gonna be pulling it towards the back side of the motor, towards the exhaust, while we go ahead and tighten down the intake cam. And you're gonna wanna bring this to 55 foot-pounds. It'd probably be helpful if our wrench would have set where we want it to. All right, so we've got our torque wrench set anywhere between 52 to 55 foot-pounds on the cams. We typically take it to about 55, but we'll kind of go from here. And Alex is just gonna hold this cam in place while we tighten this down. And we are there. So now that the exhaust or the intake cam is done, we're gonna move on to the exhaust cam. On the exhaust cam, what I like to do, take a small pry bar or something like that, set it up on this this intake actuator and just apply a little bit of tension, because when you tighten this down, it's gonna cause that cam gear to move. It's gonna cause a lot of chain slack there. So what we'll do, again, same thing here. And we're just gonna tighten it down. Now that that's done, you're gonna see we have really good chain tension here that keeps both of the gears in place in time, and it doesn't cause any damage. If you don't hold the cams in place while you're torquing this down, you're either gonna break a cam on where it's being held in by the timing portion, or you're gonna end up breaking a cam, spinning it, and then you have motor problems. So make sure that you're holding that really tight when you're going through and doing this process. Now from here, we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna put on our final washer. We've already cleaned these surfaces multiple times, so we're just gonna slide that on. And then from here, we're good to go ahead and we're going to pull this pin out of the new tensioner that you receive. And that's gonna lock. I like to give this a little tug to make sure that it actually locks on that next gear. And this is gonna give us really good chain tension for the build. So at this point, we're gonna go ahead, we're gonna get the timing cover lubricated with some RTV black. It doesn't take a gasket, it's just gasket maker. And we're gonna get that back on, double check everything, put some paint pen on it, and get it going. All right, so now that we are ready to put the timing cover back on, we're gonna go ahead and replace out the crank seal that goes on the front side of your timing cover. What I like to do is grab either a 34 or 36 millimeter socket. It fits pretty well, but it doesn't quite get to that outer edge. So that way we're making sure we're not damaging the timing cover or anything like that. Take a hammer, we're just gonna tap this out. And that is out. Old seal gets tossed to the side. We're gonna do the same thing with the new seal. You wanna try and make sure that you put it in as uniform as possible. So kind of just go through, you know, put it on this edge, tap it down, put it on this edge, tap it down. Just move it around to make sure you're getting a nice, flat, maiden surface. Now what you're looking for is any portions of the lip that might be coming up and over, something along those lines. You want it to be pretty much flat all the way around as it is now. There's no protrusions or anything like that. And then the next step is preparation. You want to make sure that you have all of your previous RTV really nice and cleaned off. Get as much old oil out of here, etc. You're going to be having RTV here, 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 up here, and then all around this edge as well. So you want to make sure that you take a razor blade, get that really nice and clean. You can even hit it with a light wire brush, just to kind of give it that nice refreshed surface. You don't want any RTV that is going to be sticking in here, so make sure you take some brake clean, spray out all these grooves really well, so that way you don't have any contamination or anything that's going to get in your oil pickup tube, clog, etc., and cause future failures. So now we're going to move on to doing the RTV of this. We'll go from there. All right, so this is some of my favorite stuff to use. It's easy to assemble, doesn't get your hands sticky, nothing like that. It allows you to get a really good bead on it, as well as keeps your fingers from hurting from trying to squeeze the tube out. So the Permatex Right Stuff, this stuff adheres extremely quickly, makes it so that way you're not having to wait 24 hours to start your car again after oil going through it, etc. Yeah, so first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna get these center ports done. We're gonna just lay a nice about 2 millimeter bead, you know, just around here. Sometimes, you know, you'll take your finger and smooth it out, whatever you want to do there, but you don't want to do too much and you don't want to do too little. Otherwise, you're going to find yourself with either a leak or RTV in your pickup tube. You don't want that. So you go ahead, we'll get this coming out the tube. So there's a couple nice circles there, and same thing down here. All right, so as you can see, we laid down a nice thin bead. It is pretty spread out. So that way, once it actually compresses onto the housing, you're gonna see that it's, you know, overflowing out the sides. It's gonna go ahead and create a really good seal to prevent oil from leaking. Now, for those of you doing this with your stuff in the car, obviously this is a really tricky portion because right here, you're gonna have your fender well, your fender, and your frame that's gonna be sitting right there. So what you wanna do is you wanna try and move this around your water pump as much as possible. Put the actual water pump spindle in a good location to where you can kind of get it through. But from there, we'll go ahead and we'll just stick this on here. What I typically will do is try and line these 3 bolts up and the top. And once you have that lined up, you're typically in a pretty good position. All right. Now these do have dowel pins on them. So once you get those dowel pins in, you should be good to go. The first thing that I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take my big 13 mils because they're gonna hold this timing cover in place as well. We're gonna get those threaded in. Then we have our 13 mil down here. You're gonna have your long one that goes here. Remember, this one will always go right down here on that little odd shaped portion of the timing cover. And this is gonna be mostly for like Speed 6 guys and stuff like that who have lines that actually are supposed to connect from the factory. The next thing you're gonna notice is in your timing cover bolts, you have one bolt that is slightly longer than the rest. If you try and put this bolt anywhere else, you're either gonna punch through the block, something along those lines, create damage, or find yourself trying to use a short one where this one's supposed to go. This slightly longer one is the one that goes right above the crank. So it's gonna come right here. And that one will go all the way in. And then everything else you're gonna use is gonna be those shorter style bolts that don't have the little extension. There should be 16 of these that are gonna go back in their home. All right, so we went ahead and we got these bolts just nice and snug up against it. Now these timing cover bolts aren't gonna take a lot of torque. You're only looking at about 8 foot-pounds, about 97 inch-pounds to get these completely set to where they need to be. And then for these larger 13 millimeter bolts, you're looking right around 35 to 40 foot-pounds to get those ones all set up. So we're gonna go ahead and do, so we're gonna go through on the torque spec, starts here, comes down, and then moves its way over, jumps, and just kind of that same pattern all the way through. And then we'll go ahead and move on to the crank pulley. Again, before you get to this step, you really want to make sure that you have double confirmed that your crank is still sitting up against that pin. Could have at least waited until I wasn't talking, you f***ing whore.
That makes good content.
I don't know if it does.
Gotta keep it lighthearted.
All right, at this point, we're gonna take our crank pulley. This is a brand new crank pulley, so it's already marked at the 20th tooth. You can see there it has a little bit of white paint on it. Chances are you've got a pretty dirty crank pulley, so you're gonna wanna go ahead, clean that up, and count backwards to your 20th tooth. So starting at this gap, you're gonna count counterclockwise until you hit that 20th tooth that is shown there. This 20th tooth is your timing mark. If you don't line this up, you're gonna have a problem. It's not gonna start, it's gonna read off, it's gonna throw timing codes, whatever it may be. So make sure that you're adding up and marking that 20th tooth to line up with your sensor. With every motor that we build, we use a spare sensor to make sure that we are putting it right at the 20th tooth and within an acceptable range. Obviously, you'll be able to move this up and down just ever so slightly to make sure that you have it lined up where it needs to be. When you're putting on your crank pulley, one thing we always make sure is that you never spin it counterclockwise. For any reason that there is a lack of rotation or whatever it may be, you don't want to spin it counterclockwise and then all of a sudden your crank moves off of your timing pin and then you have to pull your timing cover back off to get it in place or whatever it may be. So we're gonna go ahead, we're gonna slip this on, just slowly sticking it in, okay, going clockwise. And again, this hole right here is gonna line up with this threaded portion on the timing cover. So we're gonna go ahead, line that up. We're gonna take our sensor now, and we are just gonna make sure that we are within an acceptable range. So we gotta come a little bit more, just a hair. And about right there, we're perfectly centered with our 20th tooth, which tells us once we actually, torque this motor down, we're gonna be good to go. If there is any spinning that this wheel does, we'll still be able to slide this up and have it read on the 20th tooth by about a half tooth. So we do have some additional wiggle room there. So now for this, what you're gonna do is you're gonna just put in your crank pulley bolt, the new one that came in your kit. These are a TTY bolt, which means torque to yield. So you only want to be using these once. They do recommend the same thing with the cam gears. Use your best judgment, it's kind of up to you. We don't really care too much for the cams. They don't see as much, they don't typically see a failure unlike the washers here. So this bolt is going to get 72 foot-pound first step, and then from there we're going to go ahead and do a 90 degree to finish that off, and then we'll have it all set up. For our 90. All right, so we have this gun set up at 92 degrees. Typically we go a little bit over, doesn't really hurt a whole ton, but the torque spec again is 72 foot-pounds, and then anywhere from 88 to 92 degree rotation from there. Having one of these can be a lifesaver. All right, so at this point, we've got this torqued down. We did about 86 degrees on it, just because we did go over just a hair on the actual torque spec. I think we went to about 76 foot-pounds. So we did about 86 to 88 degrees on this. So now that you've done that, you are all good to go. All the timing is set, and you can now take this pin out of the back and pop those off of your cams. Pop the timing tool off your cams. A lot of people say not to use this, but again, your crank is at a perfect 90 when it's up against this, so you shouldn't have any issues with that. But you can put your car in 6th gear to create more additional drag, so that way you're not having issues, when you're doing this inside of the car. And then you'll pull off your timing plate off of the cams, and then you're gonna be all set. All right, so now we are completely finished with our timing job for the Mazdaspeed motor. Again, you want to make sure that you spin everything over by hand just to make sure that it is good to go. Make sure that you remove that cam plate. Now, when you get your kit from us, you are going to get a new valve cover gasket as well. So you'll be able to, make sure that's all nice. You want to put a little bit of RTV up on this ledge here, up on this ledge, and then over on the actual high pressure fuel pump portion as well. So again, we appreciate you guys watching. Appreciate you guys being great customers of ours. Make sure that you like and subscribe, and we'll see you back here for our next video. Two diamond washers for each gear, and then it's also going to include your Damn, I forgot what we include in a kit. What do we include in a kit? I'm like looking at it. Washers. Oh, okay. Let's restart that.